Why do I have this camera? If you guessed that I saw the awesome photos of Jeff Bridges with his wide lux, you'd be correct. This is going to be a short one. There isn't really all that much to say that hasn't already been said. The camera does what it says it's going to, and nothing more. This camera came out in 1989, but looks like it was designed in the early 2000s. Hardly a non-round edge to be found, which makes holding this not super great. Calling this a toy camera or Lomo from the old Russian mass-produced plastic film camera manufacturers is a little harsh for this camera. It is cheap and it is plastic, but while other Lomography favorites almost always have an objectively better alternative that gives consistent results, which isn't what the hipsters of Lomographic societies like, this camera doesn't have much else to replace it. The company Lomography also sells a Horizon model, Bel Air, and made the Sprocket Rocket as well as the Spinner 360 toy cameras. If the Panon Wide Lux is a Japanese college professor, this Horizon 202 is a Soviet-era substitute high school teacher that has everything needed to become a full-time teacher, but prefers a more dramatic experience. If you're thinking about getting a wide lux, I highly recommend just buying a used or new Horizon camera. Most of these have more shutter and aperture options than the wide lux, and it will cost you about 1/10 of the cost of the wide lux to figure out if this style of shooting is for you. The wide lux f8 does give you an extra 20 degrees at 140 degrees versus the Horizon's 120 degrees. This is due to the 26mm lens on the wide lux versus the 28mm lens on the Horizon. The two cameras weigh the same and have similar dimensions, although the wide lux feels much better in the hands. The wide lux only goes to f11, where the Horizon goes to f16, and the Horizon has 6 total shutter speeds versus the wide lux's 3, without losing anything other than camera recognition and bragging rights. Finding those wide lux cameras are difficult and are way more expensive. From the reviews I've read, you're not really sacrificing enough in image quality to make the price difference worth it, but if money's no object, I suggest the wide lux. I also don't like this being compared to the X-Pan system or something like the Bronica 135W back. Those don't have rotating lenses or a 120 degree field of view. The X-Pan is the coolest ticking time bomb in the camera world in my opinion, and the Bronica 135W back is just hard to find and expensive to get. This camera is sort of like how you take panoramas with your smartphone. The camera is your lens and you're the motor. The 2015 models, the Horizon Perfect and Compact, look like the 202 went on summer break and spent it playing World of Warcraft and pounding Doritos and MTM Dew. This is a full-frame camera that takes 120 degree photos at 25 by 58mm for the film negative size. This also means you get about 22 frames per roll. You might be asking, why not just get a 10mm focal length lens and crop the tops and bottoms and call it good? Well, distortion. Those super wide angle lenses are going to make everything look like it's an early 2000s rap video or skate video. The Horizon 202 has a 28mm lens, so that's the amount of distortion expected, which isn't much. The 28mm lens opens up at 2.8, which is awesome, but it's very soft wide open. The lens stops down to f16 and the shutter goes as high as 2/50th of a second, so keep that in mind. I actually think this would be a great camera to learn the Sunny 16 rule on. Just match the speed of the film to the shutter and have fun. I once loaded this with 3200 speed film and took it out. The few photos that actually came out look more like crime scene photos, so I wouldn't recommend it. You have all the basic camera stuff, a film rewind knob and button, a tripod socket on the bottom, viewfinder, shutter button with cable release, frame counter window, aperture and shutter switches, and a film advance lever. Some nice extras are a level ball at the top of the viewfinder to help things get level, and this very bizarre handle to help hold the camera and get your hand out of the way. Everything works much like a normal film camera aside from the film loading and the fact the lens swings when it takes a picture. Much like moving to very wide or very telephoto lenses, it will take some practice to find out just how you like to frame with this camera and get what you want out of it. On the surface, it might just seem like a camera with a single party trick making up its whole existence. But there is something very cool and immersive about these panoramic photos. Often with photos, it's all about that golden ratio and rules of thirds when framing the subject you want in the space. With this, I almost feel like the things in the frame that wouldn't have made it on a standard 35mm negative is the most interesting stuff. The stuff going on in the background, the wallflower to your center of attention subject. The only major problem I've had with this camera, which seems to affect all swivel lens cameras, is banding. Basically, the motor that turns the lens can get dirty or just has a case of the Mondays and creates a banding effect where you have lines of under and overexposed areas in your frame. The only solution I've found is to perform a little CLA on the lens and gearing. Now, in theory, you could make a digital camera do this, but the sensor size would have to be similar or cropped. It would need to either have a global shutter or a CMOS sensor that would resolve horizontal and not like you're reading a book. But apparently there is one, the Sights 6x17. Interested in getting one of these? Well, they seem to be going for around $150 to $400 depending on where you're buying from and condition, whereas the Widelux F8, the most recent Widelux model, seems to be going for between $1,500 and $3,000. Using this camera in public has never caused me to get extra attention, but when people you know see that spinning lens go, oh boy, question time is here. While medium format cameras give me lots of smiles and thumbs up from the boomer generation, this gets me lots of questions. This makes millennial brows furrow harder than trying to make sense of context. This camera is light, which makes the fact that it's awkward to hold even worse, and it's also small in the worst way. This isn't a fit into your pocket-sized camera, but if you have medium or Jinko-sized pockets, it will fit, after almost not fitting due to the middle lens housing making it muffin top into anything you put it into. Wider isn't always better, but it sure looks cool.